the old soldier and the alien bride. The twin suns were sinking behind the dusty hills of the Orion Rim colony, painting the sky in orange and violet light. Elias Ward stood near the small landing pad outside his farm, his rough hands holding a wooden box filled with flowers he had grown himself. He was tall but bent slightly from years of labor, his skin marked by scars and burns that no farm accident could explain. The wind carried the soft hum of an incoming shuttle, and Elias adjusted his worn jacket, trying to brush the dust from his sleeves. He had been told she was from the royal bloodline of Valkyra Prime, a world where humans were once seen as lesser, fragile creatures from a forgotten war. Now she was to be his wife, a marriage arranged by the Interworld Council to strengthen peace between species. But Elias felt no pride in it, only a quiet ache of fear and guilt. He was too old, too broken, too human. When the silver shuttle touched down, the air shimmered with its heat. The hatch opened slowly, and from the bright light stepped Seren Valkyra, tall, graceful, and radiant. Her skin glowed faintly like moonlight, her silver eyes scanning the barren landscape with curiosity and hesitation. She had expected cities of glass and light, not endless fields and a man who looked like the ruins of another time. Elias bowed slightly, his voice soft. "Welcome to the Rim, my lady. I'm sorry." She tilted her head, confused. "Sorry?" He looked down, his hand trembling. "War and farming did this to me." Seren blinked, unsure what to say. She had read about human wars, the endless battles that once shook the stars, but those were just stories in her academy texts. Now one of those humans stood before her, flesh and blood, humble and scarred. The other settlers watched from a distance, whispering, "Why would a royal marry an old Terran?" One alien muttered, "They say humans used to destroy planets," another said. "And now they grow potatoes." Elias ignored them, leading Seren down the dirt path toward the farmhouse. It was small, built by hand from wood and recycled metal, with flowers growing along the windows and solar panels on the roof. Inside, everything smelled of soil and fresh bread. "I built this after the last harvest," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "It's not much, but it's home." Seren ran her hand across the table, surprised by its warmth. "You made this?" Elias smiled faintly. "After the war, I wanted to make something that grows instead of burns." That night, they sat outside under the alien sky. Seren stared at the twin moons, her long hair shimmering like silver dust. "Your people," she said softly. "They were warriors once, were they not?" Elias's eyes grew distant. "Once, yes. We fought too long, too hard, and when the stars stopped burning, we had nothing left but soil." He looked at his hands, at the scars that told a story she could not yet imagine. "I am sorry for what I am," he whispered. "I wanted to be better for you." Seren frowned, watching the man who apologized for surviving. In her world, warriors were honored, sung in temples, but this human carried his past like a shadow chained to his soul. She wanted to ask him more, but his gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the dark sky met the silent fields. Suddenly the ground trembled slightly. A faint alarm echoed in the distance, an old warning tone from the colony perimeter. Elias stood instantly, his reflexes sharp, his hand reaching for something under his coat before stopping himself. Seren watched him, startled for a moment. His face changed. The calm farmer vanished, and in his place stood a soldier. Eyes cold and focused, then, just as quickly, he exhaled and relaxed. "Probably a sensor glitch," he said, but his voice held a hidden edge. Later that night, when Seren went to her room, she looked through the window and saw him still outside. He was standing in the field under the stars, holding a small metal pendant, shaped like an eagle clutching the earth. "The old symbol of humanity." He whispered something into the wind, words she could not hear, and then knelt, pressing his hand to the ground as if feeling for something buried deep below. In that moment, Seren realized that her husband was not what he seemed. He moved with the silence of a predator who had hunted through battlefields. He spoke with the grief of someone who had seen entire worlds fall. And yet he smiled with a gentleness that didn't fit any of those things. When she finally lay down to sleep, the faint sound of thunder rolled across the horizon. Though there were no clouds in the sky, she didn't know it yet, but the sound wasn't thunder. It was the awakening of something old, something human, buried deep under the soil. And Elias Ward, the man who apologized for his scars, was the last person who knew what was coming. The next dawn would bring questions that could change everything. For Seren Valkyra had married not a simple farmer, but the last soldier of humanity, waiting for a war the galaxy had already forgotten. Shadows of the past. The next morning came quietly, sunlight spilling across the valley like liquid gold. Serene woke to the sound of soft humming. Elias was already outside, repairing the old water pump near the barn. He moved slowly but with precision, every gesture calm, every motion purposeful. His face was peaceful, yet his eyes held something that didn't belong to this gentle world. Something that belonged to another life. Another battlefield. Saren watched him from the doorway, wondering how a man could carry such stillness and such storm at the same time. He smiled when he noticed her. "Morning, my lady." "Breakfast is inside." His voice was kind, but she caught the way his hand trembled slightly as he turned the wrench. A tiny scar across his wrist caught the sunlight. Thin, straight, surgical, the mark of a plasma blade. She said nothing, but her mind refused to let go of what she had seen the night before. That moment when the alarm echoed, the way his whole body reacted like a soldier ready for battle. After breakfast, Saren wandered around the house. Curious about this human life, the shelves were filled with books, not holograms, not data chips, but paper. Real paper, titles written in a language older than her empire. On one wall hung a faded photo. Men in uniform standing before a burning sky. She saw Elias among them, younger, stronger, but unmistakable. Her heart tightened. A quiet whisper in her mind said, "He is not who he says he is." Later that day, while Elias went to the southern fields, Saren explored the cellar beneath the house. The door creaked, the air thick with dust and metal. Rows of old tools lined the walls, but at the far end, hidden under a tarp, she saw a large crate sealed with the symbol of a Terran eagle. Curiosity won over fear. She brushed away the dust, pressed the panel, and it hissed open. Inside, she found an old uniform folded with care, black and gray, its shoulders marked with faded stars. Next to it lay a data drive labeled Operation Emberfall, classified. Saren hesitated, her fingers trembling as she inserted the drive into the old projector. The air filled with blue light, flickering images coming to life before her eyes. She gasped. It was war, but not like the ones in her history lessons. It was chaos. She saw humans standing against fleets that covered the sky, ships burning, planets falling, soldiers shouting through static-filled comms, and at the center of it all, a man with a rifle, Elias Ward, shouting orders, his face smeared with blood and fire. Serene covered her mouth, her heart pounding. The galaxy had told her that humanity's armies had vanished long ago, destroyed in the Great Purge War. But here he was, one of them, alive, hidden, farming in peace while the stars forgot his name. She couldn't stop watching. She saw him dragging wounded soldiers to safety, standing against mechs 20 times his size. At one point, he looked straight into the recording camera and said, "If this is the end of humanity, let them remember we stood till the last breath." The image burned into her soul. When Elias returned that evening, he found Saren sitting silently in the living room. The projector was still glowing faintly behind her. He froze in the doorway. The air heavy between them, she looked up, eyes filled with shock and something close to sorrow. "You were there," she whispered. "You fought in the purge." He sighed, removing his gloves, his voice low. "Yes." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Elias walked to the window, staring at the distant hills. "I didn't want you to know," he said. "That life, it ended a long time ago." Serene's voice trembled. "Why hide it? Why live here like a ghost?" He turned, his eyes old and tired. "Because ghosts don't hurt anyone." She felt the weight of those words. Elias walked to the table, picked up the medal she had found, a small silver star, and placed it in her hand. "That was given to me for surviving a battle that shouldn't have been fought," he said. "But every medal I earned was bought with someone else's blood." Serene wanted to speak, but her throat closed. This man, this quiet farmer, had seen the end of worlds, and still he had chosen peace. She suddenly understood his apology on the landing pad. He wasn't ashamed of his scars because they were ugly. He was ashamed because they reminded him of everything he had lost. That night, as they sat by the fire, Saren broke the silence. "The galaxy believes your kind vanished." Elias gave a faint smile. "Maybe that's for the best. But they're wrong, aren't they?" she asked. He looked into the flames, the reflection of old battles burning in his eyes. "Humans don't vanish. Saren, we rebuild, we hide, we wait, outside." Thunder rolled again, though the skies were still clear in the far distance. The night flickered with faint red light. Serene shivered, sensing something vast and awakening beneath the soil. Elias stared into the darkness beyond the fields, his jaw tight. He whispered so softly she almost didn't hear him. Not yet. Not again. The quiet farmer's mask was slipping, and the galaxy's forgotten war was about to return. The truth, beneath the soil, the morning light came with the cry of distant birds and the hum of harvest drones drifting across the valley. Seren stood by the window, her silver eyes reflecting the orange dawn. Her thoughts tangled like vines. Elias was outside again, silent as always, repairing an irrigation pipe that didn't really need fixing. She could tell he was trying to keep busy, trying to keep his mind from drifting back to the ghosts she had seen in that recording. But ghosts have a way of following the living even in the daylight. When she stepped outside, she noticed how still the air was. No wind, no sound of insects, just an eerie calm. The soil beneath her feet pulsed faintly, like a sleeping giant breathing beneath the surface. She called out to Elias, "Something feels wrong." He looked up, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's nothing, just the ground sensors, old tech from before we settled." But Seren could tell he was lying. His eyes betrayed a flicker of recognition, a memory he wished to bury again. Later that afternoon, as they ate together, Seren finally asked the question that had haunted her all night. "You said humans rebuild, hide, and wait," she whispered. "What are you waiting for, Elias?" He froze for a moment, then placed his spoon down slowly. "For peace to last," he said, his voice low. "For the galaxy to forget the sound of our guns." "But the soil," she pressed gently. "There is something under it, isn't there?" Elias sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Once, this land was a battlefield, long before the colony was approved. We buried more than roots here." Seren's heart beat faster. Buried what? He looked out the window toward the fields, his gaze distant and heavy. "The last weapons of humanity." She stared at him in disbelief. "Weapons? Here? Under your farm?" Elias nodded slowly. "After the purge, a few of us who survived hid the remaining defense systems underground. We sealed them, programmed them to sleep until the world was safe again." He paused, voice thick with regret. "I thought they would never wake." The air between them turned cold. Seren rose to her feet. "Why didn't you destroy them?" Elias's voice hardened. "Because one day someone might come back." He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw the steel behind the softness, the commander who once led men through hell. "I planted over the old bunkers, turned the ground into farmland. I thought if I grew enough life above the dead, maybe it would silence what we buried." He gave a bitter laugh. "But the earth remembers even when men try to forget." That night, while Elias slept, Seren couldn't. The stars outside seemed closer than usual, and the faint rumble beneath the soil grew louder. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped out into the cool air, the scent of metal faint under the dirt. Her steps led her toward the far edge of the field, where the crops ended, and an old metal hatch lay half buried in mud. It was covered in rust and vines, marked with faded letters, TDF Command Node 07. She hesitated only for a moment before touching it, and as her fingers brushed the surface, a small light blinked alive. The ground trembled softly, responding to her touch. Behind her, a voice said quietly, "Don't." She turned sharply. Elias stood in the darkness, his face half shadowed by the moonlight. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his tone calm but cold. Seren took a step back. "You were going to tell me eventually." He shook his head slowly. "No, because some truths should stay buried." The hatch light flickered again, scanning them both with a faint blue beam, and a mechanical voice spoke. "Identity scan complete. Commander Elias Ward, Terran Defense Force, recognized." Elias cursed under his breath. The light grew brighter and the ground around them began to shift. From beneath the soil, the faint outline of metallic plating emerged, stretching across the field. Serene stumbled back in awe as parts of the earth opened like petals, revealing dark steel and ancient machinery humming weakly to life. "What is this?" she whispered. Elias looked at her, his eyes filled with sorrow and something far older than fear. This, he said softly, is what's left of the Terran Dawn network, Earth's last defense grid. The machines were old, covered in dirt and roots, but still breathing. Long cables pulsed like veins under the surface, connecting to massive buried structures that hummed with forgotten power. Seren could feel the ground vibrating under her feet. Elias stepped forward, placing his palm on the console. Deactivate sequence, override Ward Delta. The lights dimmed for a moment, then went silent, leaving only the sound of the wind. Seren looked at him, her voice shaking. You said you wanted peace. I do, he whispered. That's why I made this place a farm. But peace doesn't last if you forget how you earned it. She stared at him, realizing he had never really stopped being a soldier. He had just buried his weapons under the soil instead of carrying them on his back. And yet there was something noble in it too. A man trying to protect without killing, to remember without repeating. As they walked back toward the house, the stars seemed to shift above them. Elias glanced up at the horizon, his instincts prickling. Far away, a faint blue glow flickered in the night sky. Not lightning, not natural, something moving fast through orbit. He muttered under his breath. They found us. Seren turned. Who? Elias didn't answer, his eyes locked on the stars, the reflection of war shining in them once again. The truth beneath the soil had awakened, and now so had the galaxy, the return of the Empire. The following night came without stars. Clouds rolled in from the far horizon, covering the moons. Turning the farmlands into shadows and silence, Seren stood on the porch, watching Elias as he sat quietly beside the old transmitter, its lights flickering weakly. He hadn't spoken much since the hatch incident, but his eyes told her everything. He knew what was coming. He had always known. The soft crackle of static came from the transmitter. Then a broken voice spoke through the static. Unidentified colony. This is Imperial Command Fleet Theta 7. By order of the Galactic Council, prepare for inspection. The words hung in the air like a blade. Seren felt her blood run cold. The Empire? Here? Elias didn't answer. He only closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. They found the signal when the system activated. He murmured. They've come to finish what they started. Within hours, the skies above the colony glowed red. Dozens of Imperial warships broke through the clouds, their hulls covered in the golden crest of the Council. Massive, silent, merciless. The colonists rushed outside, screaming, praying, running. Children clung to their mothers, drones powered down, animals scattered. Elias stood still, staring up at the sight that had once haunted his nightmares. The same insignia that had burned through the Terran fleet 2 centuries ago. Seren turned to him, her voice shaking. We have to hide, Elias, we can't fight that. He gave a faint smile that wasn't really a smile. I've hidden long enough, he said, walking toward the barn. She followed him, desperate. You said peace mattered. He stopped, his voice deep and tired. Peace only matters if someone's alive to remember it. Inside the barn, he pulled away wooden panels from the floor, revealing a hidden platform. Metal plates shifted, revealing a chamber of steel beneath the hay and tools. Seren stared in disbelief as he stepped inside. The walls lined with old armor, energy packs, rifles sealed in stasis containers. The emblem above the rack was faint but clear. Terran Defense Command. This isn't a farm, Seren whispered. It's an armory. Elias nodded, his expression unreadable. No, it's a graveyard. But tonight, it becomes a warning. Outside, a blinding beam of light struck the fields. A mechanical voice thundered from the sky. Colony 9A Delta, surrender your leader for questioning. Failure to comply will result in termination. Elias climbed up the steps, the metal armor clinking softly as he fastened it piece by piece. Seren ran to him. You'll be killed. He looked at her, his tone gentle. Maybe, but not before they remember who we are. He pressed a button on the wall, and far in the distance, The ground split open with a deafening roar. From beneath the crops and soil, huge steel shapes began to rise. Long-buried Terran defense mechs awakening after centuries of silence. The earth shook as metal giants rose, their eyes glowing like burning stars. The colonists gasped in terror and awe. Seren could barely breathe, her heart hammering. The field that once grew food now bloomed with the ghosts of humanity's war machines. Elias climbed onto one of the platforms, the hatch sealing around him with a hiss. The machine came to life, its engines roaring, its cannons unfolding from its arms. He spoke through the open channel, his voice steady, calm, powerful. This colony is under human protection. The Imperial commander's voice came through, dripping with arrogance. Human protection? You are extinct, old man. Elias smiled inside the cockpit. That's what you told us last time. The first blast came from the orbiting ships, a plasma strike that lit the night sky blue. But before it reached the surface, one of the defense mechs fired a pulse shield, absorbing the impact in a wave of blinding light. Then the mechs retaliated. Beams of red and white energy cut through the clouds, striking the Imperial frigates above. The ground shook as explosions thundered across the horizon. Seren watched in disbelief, tears streaming down her face. The quiet man she had married was gone. In his place stood the last commander of Earth's forgotten army. The villagers cheered, though many trembled, unsure if they were witnessing salvation or the beginning of another end. Elias guided the machine through the field. Firing at the descending gunships, his voice came through the colony speakers, strong and steady. Get to the shelters, stay underground, whatever happens. Don't come out until the light fades. The colonists obeyed, running for the tunnels as the battle raged above. Seren refused to move. She ran to the command station. Trying to raise a signal through the storm, static screamed through the comms. Then she finally heard him again. Seren, if this goes wrong, she interrupted, her voice breaking. Don't you dare say goodbye. He chuckled softly. I wasn't going to. I was going to say thank you. For what? She asked, tears in her eyes. For reminding me that I'm still human, he said. Before cutting the channel in the sky, one Imperial battleship exploded in a flash of orange light. Another followed, spiraling into the ocean miles away. But for every ship destroyed, 2 more appeared through the clouds. The numbers were overwhelming, and the defense systems began to falter. Elias's mech was struck, metal tearing apart. Alarms blaring inside the cockpit. Still, he refused to fall. He aimed the last weapon core and whispered, "For Earth," before firing a massive blast that ripped through the command cruiser above. The explosion painted the night red, the shockwave flattening the fields and silencing everything. When the smoke cleared, the Imperial fleet was retreating. Broken and burning, the colony stood half in ruin. But alive and through the wreckage, Seren ran across the blackened soil, calling his name when she reached the fallen mech. The cockpit opened slowly. Elias stepped out, wounded, burned, but standing. The stars above him were bright again, the warships gone. He looked at her and whispered, "Told you. Farming keeps you strong," she laughed through her tears. Holding him close as the dawn began to rise, but behind them, in the distance, one of the defense beacons blinked red again, a signal sent deep into the void, carrying 3 words the galaxy hadn't heard in centuries. Humanity, still, here. The man who survived humanity. The first light of dawn touched the valley, sliding across broken fields and smoking craters. The twin suns rose slowly, revealing what the night had hidden. Blackened soil, shattered glass, twisted steel. The colony that had once been a place of peace now looked like a monument of survival. And among the ruins stood Elias Ward, his armor scorched, his breath uneven, his hand still trembling from the weight of command. Seren ran toward him, her steps splashing through puddles of melted soil, her hair streaked with ash. When she reached him, she stopped. Unable to speak, he turned, a faint smile forming through the dust on his face. "It's over," he whispered. But she could see in his eyes that it wasn't. Not truly, because wars never really end. They just grow quiet, waiting for another voice to call them back. Around them, survivors began to emerge from the shelters. Blinking in the harsh light, children cried. Farmers looked up at the sky with disbelief. The enemy fleet was gone. Only smoke trails remained. Yet above the clouds, unseen by most, hundreds of silent satellites had already recorded everything. And somewhere in the dark expanse, a signal was being sent. carrying proof that the humans were not extinct. The galaxy would soon remember what it had tried to forget. Elias walked slowly through the wreckage, stopping beside the burned hull of one of his old machines. He placed his hand on the cold metal, closing his eyes. "I buried you to keep peace," he murmured. "And now I've awakened you again." His voice was heavy, filled with a sadness that words couldn't soften. Serene touched his arm gently. "You saved them. You saved all of us." He shook his head. "I only reminded the universe that humans don't kneel." Later that day, the colonists gathered in the square. They cheered when Elias appeared, though he tried to wave them silent. To them, he was a hero reborn, the symbol of a legend come to life, but to himself, he was just a tired old man who had outlived his time. He looked at their faces, fear, awe, and hope, and knew what came next if the Empire had found them once. It would return stronger, smarter, angrier that night. As the fires dimmed and the stars brightened again, Serene found Elias sitting outside the farmhouse. The roof was half gone, but the porch still stood. He stared at the horizon where the twin moons hung like silver coins. "I thought I could escape it," he said softly. "The fighting, the orders, the blood." She sat beside him. "You can't escape who you are, Elias. But you can choose what to do with it." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what being human means." For a long while they sat in silence, listening to the soft hum of the machines buried beneath the fields. The ancient Terran grid was awake now, its systems humming quietly, sending coded pulses through the soil. Serene could feel it, a living heartbeat deep below the planet's crust. "Will they come again?" she asked. Elias nodded slowly. "Yes, and others too, some to fight us, some to find us." "Then what will you do?" she whispered. He looked toward the stars. "What humans always do, endure." Days passed, then weeks. The colony rebuilt itself under Elias's quiet guidance. The wounded healed. The fields were cleared. But in the dark sky, new patterns of light began to appear. Ships, probes, silent observers. Rumors spread fast across the galaxy. Stories whispered in the halls of alien empires. "The humans are back," they said. The ashes of Earth still burn one evening. A small ship descended through the clouds, unarmed, bearing the white symbol of truce. From it stepped a young alien envoy, trembling as he approached the old farmer. "Commander Ward," he said, bowing slightly. "The council requests a meeting." Elias studied him for a long moment, then replied quietly, "Tell them I'm not a commander anymore. I'm a farmer." The envoy hesitated. "They saw what you did. They call you the man who survived humanity." Elias's gaze turned distant. "No, humanity survived me," he said softly, and walked away. That night, Serene found him in the fields again, standing where the soil still bore the scars of battle. The wind moved through the broken crops like whispers of the dead. She asked gently, "If they come again, will you fight?" He turned toward her, his expression calm. "Only if I must, but next time we fight to remind them of mercy." "Not vengeance," she smiled sadly. "You always speak like the war never ended." He looked at the sky. "Because it never does. It only changes shape." A soft chime echoed from the farmhouse, a transmission coming through. Serene hurried to check it while Elias stayed outside. The message flickered across the screen, filled with static and old Terran code. One line stood out clear and bright. "To any surviving command, this is Arc Station Sigma. Humanity endures." Serene gasped, calling for Elias. He entered slowly, eyes widening as the words appeared again, repeating in rhythm like a heartbeat. "Arc Station Sigma, the lost refuge of the Terran fleet, thought destroyed centuries ago." A faint smile crossed his face, half joy, half disbelief. "So," he murmured. "We were never alone after all." Serene looked at him, her voice trembling. "What will you do now?" He turned toward the open door, the stars reflected in his eyes. "Now," he said quietly, "I plant again." She frowned softly. "Plant." He nodded, stepping out into the night. Peace, hope. Maybe a new beginning. He walked into the ruined fields, digging his fingers into the soil still warm from battle. The dirt clung to his hands, black and heavy but alive above him. The stars burned bright, no longer cold, and somewhere far beyond those stars, ships were moving, carrying the whispers of humanity's return. Elias Ward smiled, tired but proud. He had fought wars, built worlds, buried weapons, and watched empires rise and fall. Yet in the end, All he wanted was this, a seed, a sunrise, and someone who believed in him. The galaxy would tell his story for generations. They would say he was the man who survived humanity. But those who knew him, the ones who lived under his protection, the woman who loved him, they would remember him not as a soldier, not as a commander, but as a farmer who turned battlefields into gardens. And as dawn painted the sky gold once more, the earth beneath the Orion rim whispered its truth. Humanity never dies, it simply waits to grow again.